Hello everyone, I would like to welcome you all for today's session. So we at Hack the Mountains have come up with a learning series of workshops called Hack the Mountain Qubits. Qubits is a computing term. Another term for qubits is quantum bits. Just like swarm quantum of packets of information makes the whole information, in that way these series of workshops would definitely make you a tech geek at the end. These workshops already started from 20th of September 2020 and they will continue till 9th of October 2020. These workshops would be conducted by industry professionals. Even if you're a beginner in the tech field, these sessions would take you from a very basic level, basically from the scratch. So a question might be coming to your mind, like what would you get with in these sessions? So learning and experience sharing by industry professionals, rewards for participants during the workshops, certificates to all the participants, and obviously a lot of networking. So stay tuned till the end of the workshop to get a feedback link, and only by filling that feedback link you will get the e-certificates. Now coming on to today's workshop. So, have you ever heard of personal branding? If not, let's start. Personal branding is the conscious and intentional effort to create and influence public perception of an individual by positioning them as an authority in their industry, elevating their credibility, and differentiating themselves from the competition to ultimately advance their career, increase their circle of influence, and have a larger impact. We at Hack the Mountains have come up with this workshop on personal branding. So let me introduce you to our today's speaker, who is Miri Rodriguez. She's currently head of global internship program at Microsoft. She has worked with top tech giants and speakers at quite big organizations. She is a book author at Kogan Page as well and a professor at Crehana. So welcome, Miri, and I would like to hand over the session to you with this. All the best.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share some insights about personal branding. I love how you introduced it. It is indeed something that we get to intentionally create. It's something that for me, in my own experience, I've had the opportunity to journey through and learn. And so I want to share those learnings with you today. You might be a little bit surprised on what you thought this session may be about and really what it is about. When we think about personal branding, our mind typically goes to a social media presence or perhaps a LinkedIn profile or a resume. And it is none of that and all of that at the same time. So we're going to learn a little bit about that. And I'm glad that you're here today. We will allow some questions in the end as well. So I'll end maybe at the 45-minute mark, maybe a little earlier to allow those questions. So do prepare them and I'll be glad to answer them. I'm going to share my screen with you and I'm going to present some quick thoughts on what I have learned that personal branding is, because as I said, a lot of us may be confused or may have an idea of what it could be, but truly what it encompasses is so much more than a resume, a profile, or a digital presence. For me, a personal brand is not actually who you say you are, it's how you make people feel. And it took me a long time to really arrive at this conclusion that our brand is truly how we show up and how people perceive that as showing up, whether it's via email, on a broadcast like this one, on LinkedIn. Every bit of who we are is showing up in different places and different spaces, and it's combining these elements that are making people feel something or not. And it is really our job to intentionally drive what we want them to feel. We get that power. We get to drive our own brand, and we get to deliver that to an audience. And for me, there's a few elements that we have to consider when we're thinking about a personal brand. So the first one is mission. And a lot of us, including me, don't really stop to think about that, don't really stop to understand that there has to be a mission to the brand, just like there is a mission to any corporate brand or a product on the market. If you think about people that have successfully achieved that, building their brand, an influencer, a YouTuber, someone on TV, a personality, they have actually created a mission for themselves, created an intention for themselves to how they're going to go in the market, who they're going to target in the market, and that's why they're successful. A good brand has attributes. We all have attributes, and that's the truth. And I found in my own journey that my attributes perhaps were not playing in the way that I wanted them to. So I had to get intentional. I had to modify them. I had to, highlight some of them, downplay some of them, really think about my intention to this mission that I was driving. A character is part of a brand. So that you have attributes that make up your brand. You also have a character to your brand, core values that you align to, all of these things that make up who you are. You define that for yourself. A story, all of us have a story. But do we really use it? Do we really know how to craft it and design it in a way that it's going to land our own brand, that is going to distinguish our brand from others, right? That is the differentiator from a resume, for example. If your resume looks a lot like somebody else's, the story is what makes it look different and come alive. So have you considered your personal story as the differentiator, as the unique point of your brand? And of course, it has SEO. Today, it is not a nice to have, it's a must have, your digital presence, because we are living in the digital age. So as you think about how your brand shows up on digital, if you take a time right now to Google yourself or to Bing yourself, and there's a couple of possibilities that could happen. The first one is nothing shows up. That's a problem, right? That means you don't exist right now in the digital space. If you Google yourself and somebody else shows up, that's a problem, right? That means that nobody's going to find you. Again, they're finding somebody else. And if you Google yourself and you find yourself, but it's not what you want, so old pictures or somebody tagged you somewhere, that's a problem too, right? So you have the power and you should own your digital presence. And so all of these things are things that I did not know in my journey. I had to learn and to build, and I'm continue building. So it's something that it continues to be a journey as I build my brand. This is me 8 years ago. I started my journey at Microsoft, and that was actually my first profile picture at Microsoft. And then I was really excited to be there. As you could see, great smile. I was all smiles. And I was really happy because Microsoft just called me one day. I didn't really, had to go through the whole application process. I mean, I did, but they actually recruited me. So they called me, they said they wanted me to join, and I was elated. I didn't know that, I could really work for a company like Microsoft. I didn't realize that I had that potential. And so I was really excited to be there until maybe a few days, a few weeks later, when I realized the group where I was in, the extended group, there was 4 women who actually began to bully me. And I was confused at first. I was like, what's happening? I didn't know if it was me. I didn't know if it was the organization. I didn't know if it was the company. I had no idea. I was really, really confused. And so at that time when I first started, I realized something was wrong, and I didn't know what. So I stayed there for a while, stayed for actually a year. And then I was like, okay, it's not getting better. It's not getting better. And I remember I coming into work one day, and early in the morning, we had an open workspace. And so all the desks were basically, you could work next to each other, you could see each other. And I walked up to my desk and I found something on my desk that they had left me. And I was, very shocked and very sad. And I grabbed my laptop and I said, you know what? I quit. That's it. I'm gone. And you win. And so I grabbed my laptop and started to walk away. And this program manager whose desk was almost next to mine grabbed me by the arm, and he's like, "You're not going anywhere." And I was like, yes, I am, right? And he's like, no, you're not. You're not going anywhere. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, Microsoft needs you. You can't leave. And I was like, what do you mean Microsoft needs me? Microsoft doesn't need me. I'm totally replaceable. And he's like, no, Microsoft needs you. Look, why don't you go home? Why don't you think about this and come back? Come back tomorrow. And, think about it first. Don't quit tonight. So I said, okay, I'm going to go do that. And I went home and had a really bad night. But in that moment, I really thought about, why would I come back? Like, truly, why would I come back to Microsoft? What is my why? And I realized at that moment that I actually, up until that point, I had not actually given myself a purpose for my life. Like, I'd been living my life, normal. I went to school, I got married, I had a couple kids, got a job, was building my career. But I really had not purposefully thought about my mission. Right. I had no mission. I had mixed attributes for my brand. You could talk to a group of people and they could say, hey, Miri is this. You could talk to another group of people. They'd be like, oh, Miri is that. So there was no consistency in my brand. I had no character definition. I didn't know who I was in my own story. I actually had no story, to be honest. I had one. I just didn't know how to leverage it. I didn't know how to build it, craft it, and design it in a way that would serve me. And if you Googled me or Binged me, you'd probably just find my address at that point, or maybe my parents' address. I don't know. Granted, social media had just gotten started at that point. It wasn't as poignant when it came to digital presence. Nonetheless, it was out there, and I had not really considered putting myself out there. I had not considered my purpose. I had not considered any of this. So I did decide to come back, and that's why I'm still here the next day. And I did it by writing this mission statement that you see here, which still serves me and it serves you today. I gave myself a purpose. I gave myself a brand mission, and this is it. I am blank and blank because the world needs blank in order to blank. That's where I went out with. I was like, okay, if I'm going to come back, I'm going to come back with a purpose. What is that? What do I need to do? Up until now, what have I been? Who have I been? For whom? And I came back because I decided if this is happening to me, it's probably happening to other people, right? To other women. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to expose it. And I, of course, couldn't, do anything about the bullies. The bullies were going to be the bullies. But I could do something about people that were probably feeling like me. And so I went back and I started talking about it. I started talking to the women. I started to share my story. And sure enough, I found some women that had experience or were experiencing this type of treatment. And so I gave myself this purpose. I was like, okay, I want to start talking more and more and maybe mentoring these young women. I was in my 30s, and I wanted to touch, another cohort, a younger cohort, because I thought, well, if I'm having a hard time and I'm mid-career, imagine early in career, women that are just getting started, coming into the space, how are they feeling, right? And so I targeted younger women in tech. And so what I want you to think about here, and what I want to share with you, is my story, a moment in my life, served me to create a purpose. And so I want you to think about the same. I want you to think, what has happened to you? Because a lot of stuff has happened to all of us, right? What can you leverage about your stories that you had not considered, can actually help someone, can bring insight, can build your brand in a way that you serve other people? Because our brands serve others. That's why we exist. We exist so that we can serve other people, and we serve ourselves in the same purpose. But really, all of us want to leave a mark in the world, right? All of us, that's innately what we want to do. Self-actualization is around leaving that mark, leaving that legacy. What is that for you? You can leverage your stories to determine that. And so let's start here. Let's start with the first sentence. At the time, I had no one guiding me through this process. I didn't know where to start, but I did know that I was not where I wanted to be or who I wanted to be. I didn't even know where I was at the moment. So the first thing I wanted to do was my baseline, understand that. And so for you, do the same, right? Understand and ask, how do you show up? Now, I did this many years ago, and I didn't have the tools or the technology or the knowledge to do this the best way. I would recommend you do this in a different way that I did before, because I made a lot of mistakes. The first thing is understand your baseline. Who are you today to the world, right? Where is your world today? How do you show up today? I would recommend you actually use a survey, anonymous survey, get on, SurveyMonkey or something, send it out to some people that you trust, send it out to mentors and teachers, send it out to friends, colleagues, people that want to see you win, and ask them that very question. Hey, you know what? I took a hackathon thing, session around brand. I just want to know how I show up. That's a very broad question, I know, but that's what you need. You need to know how people are perceiving you today so that you can actually change it if it's not what you want, right? And if it all comes out awesome, change nothing, but at least you'll know where you are today. How do you show up? It's a big question. It's actually asking people, how do I make you feel when I show up online, offline? What is that energy that I'm giving you, right? And so when I did this, again, I made a huge mistake. I asked a lot of people. I found a lot of haters in the process, but I did find some good answers and some themes. Now, what's going to show up here for your baseline on building your brand is attributes. People are going to say things like, oh, Miri, you show up loud. Hey, Miri, you show up vibrant. Hey, Miri, you show up whatever. And so you start creating this database, and you're going to find themes across this database. What I found in my time back then was two things that I was like, wow, this is interesting. One of them is I showed up feminist. right? And then the other one is I showed up sarcastic. And notice these things are not negative or positive. They just are. Attributes are just that. However, when I looked at these two themes of being feminist and sarcastic, I realized these were not going to serve me for my audience because I had picked my audience. Remember, I said I wanted to serve the younger women in tech based on my own story. I wanted to mentor them. I wanted to be relevant. And so I know and I knew that if I showed up, feminist, that could be something extremist to this cohort. Why? Especially in the West, feminists can show up main bashing. It can show up, very autonomous. And the reality is, for women and young women in tech, they need a tribe. They need people. They don't need to be like, oh, you can do it all on your own and be super independent and do it all by yourself. Nobody gets there alone. We all need people. We all need to succeed. It's a team sport. And so for me, I wanted to kind of dial down that idea that I showed up as a feminist. I do want to show up as a powerful woman, but I don't want to give the wrong idea of extremes. And so I dialed it down. I called myself a feminine. So I am feminine, not feminist. The other one was sarcasm. And I knew, I am sarcastic, but I knew also that that wasn't going to land well with my audience. And so what could I do to lower my tone, to modify my tone, to appeal to this audience? I showed up and I wanted to show up kind. So my overarching attributes became I am feminine and kind. So what I want you to see here is you get to build your story. You get to build your purpose, and you get to understand where you are today and how you can modify that for who you're going to be and who you want to be. Think about, again, the brands that you admire. Think about people that you follow online. Think about influencers, people that inspire you in some way. These are people that have taken the time to build their brand and their overarching attributes. Now, you might ask, why two? Well, because I can't remember 10, it's like I just picked two at the time. It doesn't have to be two. You can have 35. But for me, it's just easier to say every time and keep my brand on check, right? It's like, hey, is my tweet feminine and kind? Am I dressed feminine and kind? Do I show up feminine and kind? It's just my own gauge temperature to keep myself on brand every single time, right? So you could start there. And then what we're going to do next is actually use your story for the rest. And that's where storytelling comes in, right? So I am a storyteller, and I wrote a book about brand storytelling, and I've done this work for a few years now. And I've done it at the corporate level, and I've done it at the brand level, at the personal brand level. And these themes that I'm going to show you today, these concepts, they serve either way. So you can use this for your business, and you can use it for yourself, because truly, building your brand is building your own business as well. You are the CEO of your brand, right? So the second piece is the world needs. Why is that important? Well, because all of us here, as I said, we want to leave a mark. And what we need to do is find that need in our own space and be able to share something that appeals to that need. For example, in my case, I realized there was a need for women in tech to talk about these things that are happening. And there was a space that I was creating for that. And it enabled us not to leave. Remember, I was going to leave, right? So if I was going to leave, probably a bunch of other women were going to leave. And that was going to create an even bigger gap in the tech industry, where we're less than 2% in the gender equality base. And so for me, the world is a big place, right? It's like 8 billion people. I'm not going to touch 8 billion people, but I'm going to touch some of those people. My girls, I call them my girls, the women in tech. I started actually 101, right? I was like, I'm going to go talk 101. I'm going to mentor 101. The world really becomes your world. People that you are intentionally going to target. Think about who they're going to be and why. It could be your peers. It could be people that are older than you, people that are younger than you. It could be people in another country. It could be people all over the world. You get to decide who they are, but it is important that you target an audience. Who is that world and what do they need? For me, my girls needed to feel like they belong. They needed to feel that they were in the right place. They needed to tell imposter syndrome to shut up, because I needed to tell imposter syndrome to shut up too, right? So my story was reflecting on these other women in their journey. In order to do what? Well, in my case, it was to help close that gender gap in tech, right? I'm definitely not going to move that whole needle, but I'm helping one-on-one, and maybe one too many, some women to feel like even on the bad days, they can stay. it can stay. We are fighting this battle. We are all together. We're united. While there's other women who are not being supportive, I'm going to be supportive, right? So again, think about how you can do this for your brand. And you may be asking, how does this even tie into my profession? It does. I'll explain in a minute. What you can do and what you should do is build your origin story first. Why? So I talked about purpose. I talked about attributes. If you don't know your story, and if you don't know how to leverage your story, you will not be able to differentiate yourself in the world. Simple as that. Doesn't matter how many degrees you have, doesn't matter how many certifications. There's 1,000 other people with the same degrees and the same certifications. You will not stand out. What you're going to see here, it's a blank sheet of paper. My computer's not broken. It's an exercise that I did and that I recommend that you do as well when building your brand. It's called the origin story exercise. Basically, you grab a blank sheet of paper, as you see here, and you begin to actually map out the moments in your life. This is me, my first, when I was born. I know I'm old, 1978. And so I basically start with the day I was born, right? That is going to give me a timeline and basically a storyline of my life. Why is that important? Because as you do this exercise, your brain begins to give you ideas and uncover encoded memories that you may not have remembered that build your story up until today. Now, what you're going to do next is, after you do the day that you were born, you're going to create the next encoded memory, whatever that memory is. And if that memory is good or bad, positive or negative, and basically if it's positive, put it higher. If it's a negative, put it lower. It's going to look a little bit like this. So I'm just going to give you a quick exercise, a visual. I'm not going to go through my entire life because, like I said, I'm old, so that would be here all day. A lot of stuff has happened to me. So this is basically just a quick visual of what that might look like. Ideally, you would do this from the moment you were born until the present. Many moments in your life, highs and lows, many encoded memories. Some of them may even seem, nonchalant, not big momentum. That's okay. They're there for a reason. You remember them for a reason. They built and they shaped you in a way. And what you're going to do with this is you're going to start to see patterns, right? So the first thing is you're going to have the baseline of people telling you how you show up. And now you have this data here telling you how you've lived and how you've seen your life up until now. Those two pieces of data will help you then use it for your storytelling. This is the differentiator between me saying at a job offer or a job interview, here's my resume, and somebody asks me, hey, Miri, why should you come to Microsoft? I can say, hey, you know what? I should come to Microsoft because the word empowerment, which is Microsoft mission, I've lived that. I moved, I lived in the slums of Venezuela. I moved to the United States. I know what empowerment means. I know what self-empowerment means. I align to the values of Microsoft, right? So I can insert my story. I can insert snippets of who I am. I can say, hey, I had to earn scholarships because my parents were poor. I had to get myself through college. All of these different things I can insert as adding up my resume, right? One thing is to say, I went to the school. Another thing is to say, I went to the school and it took my parents 3 jobs to get me there, right? So that's where the stories come in, and that's where it begins to build your story. But let's get into actually storytelling. What is it and what it is not? Because a lot of people are confused sometimes about this concept. A lot of people think it's about marketing. It isn't. It can be a tool for marketing, but it really is not. Storytelling truly is the idea of telling stories, of building stories in a way that transfers information emotionally. I went through, when I started doing this work at Microsoft in engineering, I was confused as well about what storytelling was and how we could use it. And I went and I asked a whole lot of people what storytelling was not. And then I actually created my own definition of storytelling because I couldn't find a good one online. So I created mine. And to me, storytelling is the emotional transfer of information. And it's done through a character, a plot, and a conclusion. Those are the basic elements of story. But emotional transfer is the key for me. Now, think about what we just went through, right? Information, data. You've collected data, for example, from people that you trust, and they tell you how you show up. And now you've collected data from your life story, from your origin story. You have data now. What are you going to do with that for your brand? You're going to emotionally transfer it through your character, your plot, your conclusion, through your own story, through who you are. You're going to transfer it to people, and people are going to feel something with that. That's where branding begins. That's where people begin to tune in. That's where people stop scrolling and go, wait, I want to see what this is about. I want to see what this person's saying, right? It's an intention that you're driving. So where to begin, right? Where to begin? First thing is, for me, as I understood that there was an emotional transfer for storytelling, I also knew I had to design stories. And at the time, I was taking a design thinking course for my master's. And so I began to actually use this model for prototyping my stories, prototyping my brand. Basically, I began to build my brand and test my brand with my audience. I had chosen my brand, I had chosen my audience, I had chosen the stories, and I wanted to put it in the market. I wanted to see if it was going to work, right? And so what you're seeing here is, as you may know, the 5 steps of design thinking. It's typically used for products, but your brand is a product, right? Your story is a product, so you can actually submit it through this model. This is just one of many ways to design a story. But what I want you to take away here is, don't just tell a story, design it. Be intentional with it, right? And for me, what worked really here was that I submitted my stories to these 5 steps, and it started with empathy. And that was really important for me to understand, because I'm not typically an empathetic person. Actually, it's not one of my strengths. I had to understand what that meant. And for me, it's something that I call a universal truth. What is something that my audience universally could come in contact with, could tune into? Belonging is that universal truth. That's a feeling. I don't have to explain that to anyone. All of us can attest to wanting to belong. No matter our lived experiences, no matter our race, our gender, we all just want to belong. That's a universal truth. Empowerment. That's another one, right? So think again, think back to your stories, think back to who you are, think back to what you can offer the world and the insights. Nobody has lived your life. Nobody has lived your experiences. Nobody has experienced what you have. You have insights to offer the world, right? And that's that universal truth. What can we learn from that? What is that your audience is going to learn from you? What feeling is your story going to spark, is what you have to ask yourself. I learned that there are 3 levels of empathy. The first one is called cognitive empathy, as you see here. This is that type of empathy where we actually recognize that our audience, who we're going to deliver our brand to, they're humans, right? They're not just these things. They're not just a persona. They're humans, and so we have to continuously build our brand empathetically toward them. We have to continuously think about where they are. Now, I have learned a whole lot in the last 8 years about building my brand for my audience. I've learned that I have different audiences as well. I've learned that I've grown my audiences, but I've also kept my consistency for my specific audience, which is young women in tech. And I'm cognitively empathetic to them. I remember, as I get older, that they're young. I remember that I have to relate to them at the cognitive level. They are human. They have human things that they think about. They have human emotions, and I have to remember that. At the emotional empathy level, the second empathy level, is where actually I bring myself as a human as well, right? Not only as my audience human, I am too. So I allow myself to be vulnerable. I allow myself to tell my stories of heartbreak, for example. I know that my girls, they love story, they love love, right? So I'm not just going to talk about authoritative things in my knowledge in the system, or my knowledge in profession. That's a part of me, right? They want to see mom Miri, they want to see dog owner Miri, they want to see heartbroken Miri. That's what makes me human to them. So I have to bring myself to that space, right? And I know this is a little scary for people to think about, like, oh my gosh, do I have to really show up with like crazy stories? Well, that depends on your audience. Again, you get to pick your audience, and for you to actually relate to them, the more vulnerable you become, actually the more relatable, and the brand is even more powerful. The last one is compassionate empathy, and this is where actually you just kind of let go, and you're like, hey, I'm going to show up being me. I'm just going to show up authentic. I'm going to show up vulnerable. I'm going to show up all of me, not always, made up well. Typically, I use Instagram to reach to my girls. That's the channel that I use for them. That's where they are. And so you'll see a lot of me there that you won't see in other places. I show up, mom, I show up doing things in my house. I show up, my hair's crazy. All the things that make me human, to remind them that as I build my brand and make them feel something, I'm human too, right? I'm not just this enigmatic thing that exists. I'm human too. And basically that enables to design the story with step 1, with empathy. I'm understanding the experience that they're going through. I'm understanding how I'm leveraging my thought leadership with them. And then I get to define, right? I get to define my stories. Now, of course, I've lived a whole lot and I have a whole lot of stories to share, and I will continue. My brand continues to evolve. My stories continue to happen, right? It's always going to be. So I get to define the stories that I'm going to share. You get to do that too, right? You're going to dedicate stories to people. And it looks like this. My story is dedicated to blank. You're going to give your story a mission. You're going to tell your story where to go. So you're going to give your brand a mission. You're going to give your story a mission. Every time you tell a story, it's not just, inconsequential or nonchalant. You're going to be intentional. Again, ask yourself, who am I dedicating the story to? The persona, the demographic, the psychographic, where are they? And I should really say, you should assume, because it's true, that if you're putting your story out there in digital spaces, or even if you're not, somebody will for you, it's already global in a sense. Even if you're targeting a small cohort, once it's out there in the digital space, it's out there. And so think about that as well. Think about how that's going to land for the rest of the world. So it can help them do what? What is your story going to do? Is it going to inspire them? Is it going to educate them? Is it going to call them to action? What is it that you want to do with your story? In essence, what do you want to do with your brand? Why is that important to you? How do you even take this to the workplace? Well, I'll tell you how. The conversations with your boss are no longer going to be, what do I need to do to get that promotion? Your conversation is going to be, hey, listen, my purpose is to help so-and-so do this and this. How are you going to help me help them? How can I enable skill sets? How can you help me build skill sets so I can get better at this, right? You're giving yourself purpose. You're leveraging the aspects of who you are. You're not letting someone drive your career. You're driving it yourself, and you're enabling and empowering yourself. And make them feel what? Back to that truth, right? So in my case, again, my story is always dedicated to my young women in tech, so it can help them feel like they belong, so it can help them stay in tech and make them feel like they belong, even on the days that they don't, right? It's still a big gap. So that's how it works. And then you get to ideate. You get to ideate your brand. You get to ideate how you're going to go out there. What you see here is a acronym called Scamper, as you can see here. It's one of the brainstorming tools that I use for stories. I submit my stories through this. I really give myself a space to create different storylines from one story that I thought was good enough. My story wasn't really good. It was like, I got bullied, right? But what can I do with that? Can I talk about that one PM who basically saved me because he grabbed me and he said, stay here? I would have left, right? Can I talk about people who enable you at work? Can I talk about empowerment? Can I talk about why women do this to each other? There's so many layers. There's so many layers to the story. I get to ideate from one story. There's so many stories, right? So submit it through different ways, and you can actually leverage it in many different ways. It's called intersectionality, the intersectionality of your brand, of the many angles that you can deliver your brand. And then you get to prototype. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of how I began to think about my brand differently once I started using this model. When I started thinking about mission, about attributes. Remember, I gave myself 2 overarching attributes. I became, that's how I show up mostly, kind and feminine, right? Consistently. That's who I want to be known as. I talk about kindness. I talk about feminine things. That's how I want to show up. Granted, I do have hybrid audiences, and so I don't always show up the same way because I recognize in different spaces different audiences. So I prototype things. Now, the first thing is I begin to use LinkedIn as my testing tool for content, because everyone's on LinkedIn, right? And so it's a huge audience. I wanted to see if what I was doing was actually attracting who and why. And so this was a great way for me to test my content. Here you see me and my dog. He turned 8 this year. And of course, this is dedicated to my young women in tech. Now, I know that there's a lot more than young women in tech on LinkedIn. And so I have tested time and time again my content. This was basically talking about how pets help us cope with COVID back then. And as you can imagine, my girls reacted. Hey, oh, Miri, what a cute dog. Happy birthday to Dino, right? And then I also got a whole lot of hate. Right? A lot of people are like, hey, this is not Facebook. Why are you putting this on LinkedIn? Why are you putting your dog on LinkedIn? And what I do with that is I enable the reactions and go, okay, it landed where I wanted. It doesn't matter for everybody else. I'm like, thank you for being police content of content, but you're not my audience, right? You're not who I was targeting. It worked for who I was targeting. And this is how you get away from this idea of like, oh my gosh, what if somebody doesn't like my content? Well, if you've empathized with them, they probably will like your content. If you took time to design, you've probably taken time to empathize with your audience. The rest doesn't matter. However, I will say most of the time, you will enable more people, more content, more audiences. What happens? People begin to get curious about you. Who is this Miri putting a dog on LinkedIn, right? They start getting curious. Who is this? I go on Twitter, right? On Twitter, I have a different audience. I have more techie audience. Most tech, and Microsoft devs and IT pros and PMs, and so I get a little more sarcastic there. I'm a little more of the tech Miri, and then I get on Instagram, and you see feminine Miri, you see kind Miri. This is the one that I say it's like where I show up a lot more vulnerable. But if you look at this, people get curious, right? There's my Bing panel. I got a panel. Somebody wrote something about me because people were trying to find out who I was. Who is this Miri putting a dog on LinkedIn, right? I began to empower myself on my stories and my mission. And guess what happens? The last job that I got, this one, is because someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, Miri, I'd like for you to come work with us," right? I didn't even apply. Like I didn't know the job was even open. I wasn't going to go to HR. Now I'm in HR. Why? I've pivoted 4 times at Microsoft, right? I've pivoted my career and I've been able to do this because people want to hire people they want to work with, right? They want to work with Miri. I've enabled myself. I've enabled my mission. I've enabled my brand. And so when I show up, people are like, "Oh, Miri, want to work with Miri." Make your brand something that people get curious about. Talk about your passions. I call that demonstrated passion. "Oh, I'm passionate about tech." Okay, how? What have you done to show that? "Oh, I'm passionate about children." Okay, how? What have you done? What is your mission? How have you delivered that? Now, I can say I'm passionate about women in tech. I'm passionate about equality and diversity. I've shown it. I do it. I volunteer. I talk to women, right? I gave myself that mission and people began to get curious. Last one is to test. As I said, test your content. It's not all going to land immediately. The idea of design thinking for your brand is that you're not going to build your brand and be like, "Okay, it's all done," right? No, it's a process. It's a learning. It's you saying what will work and what not work and making yourself vulnerable again to see what works. I've failed 1,000 times, and 1,000 times I've found not to do it, how not to do it, and now I know how to do it. And I'm going to fail again and again because the channels change, the audiences change, I evolve, my audience evolves. It's not a one size fits all. Your brand will always be something that evolves. So you got to test it all the time. You're going to evolve. Your content may evolve. Who you want to show up as an archetype will also be different. So you get to do that. You are the owner. You're the CEO of your brand. So remember, if it doesn't have a character, a plot, and a conclusion, it's not a story. So you have to build your story. Who are you in your own story? Are you the hero of your story? Are you the enabler of your story? Who are you in your story? For me, I can tell you I'm not the hero of my story. In my personal story, I'm not. I am a character. I'm someone who is enabling other people through my character. I'm the Robin to the Batman, right? My plot changes, it thickens, it goes through evolution. A conclusion always for me is my final mission, that throughout my life, I will continue to enable and empower women in tech. Stories are for your audience, not to them. That means you're going to take time to design your story and your brand. You're going to be methodical. You're going to ask yourself, how do I show up? And think about that and think about how you're going to show up time and time again. You're going to get a tribe of people who you're going to trust and say, "Hey, mentor me. How do I show up? Am I showing up the way that I want to?" And they're going to be like, "No." Then you're going to go fix it, right? I have mentors. I have 6 mentors and they slap me all the time. "Nope, you're not showing up the way you want to." I go, "Great, thanks." You know what I mean? Keep me in check. Ideate, ideate, ideate. Branding is about ideation, about reinvention, it's about innovation. And you can't do that if you don't take the time. Take the time. And lastly, do it with your heart. If you build your brand just because, it'll show up inauthentic because the real passion is not there. You probably have seen that before. You've probably seen people that show up and you're like, something's missing. They talk like they know what they're saying. They show up a certain way. They dress up. I can't connect with that because they're not doing it with art. They probably discovered a method and they think that that's going to land. They might at the beginning. In the end, it won't, because truly your brand needs to be authentic and really it needs to align to your core values. And you get to determine that. You get to determine your own core values for your brand, how you're going to do business, how you're going to engage, why you're going to engage. Those are all things that you get to decide and define for yourself. And that's it for me. I know I promised some Q&A time, so I'm going to leave that time for everyone. I think we have a few minutes left. If I don't get to answer your questions, please connect with me. I would love to answer your questions on one of the channels. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So I'm going to stop sharing here and we can moderate the questions. All right. Do we have any questions?
We do not have any question,
Great.
so I'll just wrap up the session. So thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful session. I hope the viewers had learned a lot from you. And guys, do fill the feedback form to get a certificate. We'll be meeting soon. And once again, ma'am, thank you for being with us. And guys, we'll see you in the next session. So that's a sign up from my side.
All right. Thank you. I see a couple comments from Vidya. Thank you, Vidya, for your comment. Abhishek, how do you choose one thing? You like multiple things? You are going to have multiple things. You don't choose one thing. You can start with one and start testing it and start getting good at it. And then you're going to be an and person. We always are. So I don't have one thing either. I'm always doing multiple things, but always what you do choose is your mission, your actual mission. That's what you want to choose. Not you can, you can go out to the market with many things, but ultimately, who are you to the world is the one thing you want to make sure that you have out there.
Ma'am, we have one question from Abhishek, so I'll just share it here. So Abhishek has asked, how do I choose one thing? I think I really like multiple things.
Yeah, I saw that question. I was answering. So what I said, Abhishek, and thanks for asking, is you don't choose one thing, and you shouldn't choose one thing. You can choose many things. So what you should choose to do is your mission. That's the one thing in terms of like, who are you going to be? What's
Yes,
that?
sorry. No, no, ma'am. Go on, go on.
Okay, so Abhishek, what I was saying is the one thing you really should choose is your mission, how you're going to go out to the world, who is going to be your audience. Beyond that, you don't choose one thing. You can offer so many things, and you should. We are many things to many people. I offer many different things, right, in my own space. But the mission is what's important. Choose a mission that you're going to go out with, and that's going to be the consistency of your brand. Beyond that, you can share whatever you want after that.
So, ma'am, we have another question. I'll be
Okay.
sharing it. So, Vidya has asked how to be unique for Google search. Can you tell me more about it?
I can, yeah. So in Google, you'll know obviously the algorithms are pretty heavy. I can tell you I've never placed an ad or paid for any SEO on Google at all. And so everything that you see about me there, it has been organic work that I've done. So the first thing is do Google yourself. And what you find, if you find things that you don't want, go ahead and start the cleanup work of going to these website managers and asking for them to remove information about you. You can do that. And so basically you start from scratch if there's something that you don't want. Then you begin to create content. So I would say LinkedIn is a great place to use for your content. Medium is another place. The more content you start sharing, the more your name's going to start being associated by that content. If you have other channels that you want to use, Twitter, Instagram, again, it's all really about you delivering content that people connect with and start talking about, and start sharing, because that's the engagement, that's the reach and engagement. So the more you do that, the more people will get curious, as I said, and they'll start Googling this stuff, who is this person? Why are they, what are they talking about? So the more content you put out there, the more that you do. I didn't actually create a website until this year. And I did that on purpose because I didn't want people to just, go to my website. I wanted people to just Google me. And so don't create your website right away. Wait until you have an amassed audience, and then you can actually build your website, and people can go to your website to find more about you. I think you can just create that curiosity first, and that's what creates, the search for people to start trying to find you.
I guess, ma'am, we don't have any question now.
Okay.
So again, Once again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, guys, do fill the feedback form if you want a certificate. And we have a hackathon on 10th and 11th. So, please make sure to attend it. Thank you once again and signing off from this.